I'm happy that it's been done. So the title of this talk is Agile Testing. What is this anyway? Let me ask you a question. Who of you is working in an Agile context? Roughly half? A bit less, okay? Who's doing Scrum? Who's working with the Scrum team? Okay, most of the ones. The other guys who didn't raise their hands up. Now,
just a bit of louder.
A bit louder?
Yeah.
Wow, to the shout. Okay. The remaining folks who didn't raise their hand right now, what are you working in? Is it chaos or is it waterfall?
The thing is that Agile is not limited to Scrum only, right?
Sure.
So that's
So what else besides Scrum is there, which is Agile? Unified process.
So we are
Записал, положил нормально.
Everything that corresponds to the principles from the Agile. So what I'm going to do now is try to reflect on where does Agile come from, how's the tester involved in there from the past decade, so to speak, and then trying to take a closer look on where we are now, and then trying to fill out where are potential areas which we could add to as testers working in more and more contexts. Right? Okay, so a bit of my background, I hate to do that usually, so I can just brief. I'm Markus Gärtner, I'm from Germany. I wrote a book last year called 18 by Example, which just has been published in June this year, and I'm working for a company which is called IT Agile. We try to spread the Agile word in Germany and work with clients all over Germany. So for 2011, I spent 299 days on the road. Not at home, but so that's a bit of my background. I somehow, usually what I see at conferences happening at testing conferences actually from one single person in 3 years of visiting conferences said that they follow testing as a career. Who of you follow testing as a career? Maybe there's someone else? Oh, lots of them. Okay. The usual story is, this is how I fell into testing, and then you find people coming from operations, coming from tech support, coming from different backgrounds, and they say, this is how I ended up in testing. I didn't follow it directly as part of my career, but after 3 years of working, I figured out, oh, testing is just my thing. It's quite interesting. How about the ones who said, I'm following it as a career, I have been following it as a career, how did it happen to you?
Actually, I felt that testing was my profession from the very first day I was in it.
From the very first day?
Yes.
Okay. How did you recognize that?
Because, trying to find bugs, find some discrepancies in other people's work, it's something what I aim for. Because it's something that makes me happy, because I make improvements, because I have to make it better work.
Okay. So it seems quite natural to find these tiny little things that testify. Okay, makes sense. Anyone else? Okay, let's see at the end of the talk if there's something that comes to your mind. We can change that, right? So last year I organized a workshop which is called the German Agile Testing and Exploratory workshop. Is anyone aware of what the Los Altos workshop on software testing format is? Has anyone heard of that? The basic idea is campaigner point out for testers in the workshop, and they were invited in the 90s in order to get there. Who was interested in what's this test automation tool all about? Is it working for anyone? And he had 3 direct questions which any one of the attendees should answer for that first workshop. So they got together and they found out, surprising, these test automation tools don't work well, at least for the people who participated in that workshop. And since then, since 20 or so years, there are all over the world regular workshops organized. And I realized we don't have such a thing in Germany. So I started in last year. We had not so many people. We had 5 people there, and we were discussing what is agile testing anyways. So what struck me was, at the end of the day, we had we do a lot of things with stickies usually, and so at the end of the day we ended up with walls covered with stickies. We were trying to figure out, okay, what makes testing agile, following agile principles, following the values from the manifesto copy. We collected a lot of things together. For example, here we try to list out the different roles involved in an agile context, right? It's a bit different. We have the customer standpoint, the stakeholder, but you also have the product owner here. And while this is somehow different to waterfall testing, to more traditional testing, we also identify different other areas. For example, this is a larger picture. We have the culture here and requirements here. And regarding the culture, we found out that it involves a lot of learning for the tester. You have to just become more self-responsible, for example. Well, once we build all these walls, we were figuring this is not special to Agile. This is actually helping any tester. Yeah. Right. So, the question now is what does make the tester agile, so to speak? It seems no one really knows about that. I read a book from Lisa Brisbane and Jenna Bravery on that called Agile Testing, where they describe how working in an agile context could be done. But I don't think they define what agile testing is. To some extent they did in 500 pages, but still there's if you take a look on Kanban, they don't work in integrations, so you have to bring in different things, right? And there's still more to come. So where I started with agile testing, I heard a story from Elizabeth Hendrickson a while ago, where Ken Beck was a keynote speaker at a testing conference. Right? Ken Beck? Does anyone know Ken Beck? Just a few hands, interesting. Right? Ken Beck is the guy who came up with extreme programming practices, but also came up with, he wrote down what TDD is. And he was the keynote speaker at the tester conference and said, okay, here's TDD, you just develop one tiny little failing unit test. Then you just write enough code in order to make that little tiny test green. Then you consider you have to remove duplication from my code. Then you go for the next test. Right? And he was presenting this as part of extreme programming practices at the tester conference. And well, testers seem to this is test automation, we don't know how to code. And then he said, this is more striking, that that's why we don't need testers anymore. Can you imagine an audience like this one, 200 people sitting there, and there's a guy in front of them saying we don't need testers anymore?
You know, the funny thing is that we hear it quite often at our workplace. So we are not surprised at all.
My God. Now, what happened since then is the following. There were a lot of people who were not going to support that premise. They were trying to figure out, I don't believe this. I think we still need testers. Let's try to find out how and why we need testers. Right? So they came up with different techniques, different things that actually help the team discover how to work together. in different ways. So we have on the vertical axis, we have on the bottom technical-oriented tests. We have on the top business-oriented tests. Right? And we have on the left side tests that shall support the team in whatever they're doing. And on the right side, we have tests that critique the product. Right? So you end up with 4 quadrants in that part. This is usually called the first quadrant, where we say this is the quadrant where technical-oriented tests land in, which shall support the teams. So this is unit testing. This is, I hate this word, integration testing, as some people refer to it. Anything that deals with code, let's say. Right? Then we have the quadrant with the tests that shall support the team coming from a business orientation. So there's direct thing behind the product. What's the main business of whatever product we're building right now? Trying to take a look from there. The third quadrant is critiquing the product from the business orientation, usability testing, user acceptance testing, to some extent exploratory testing as well. And the fourth quadrant, you have tests that are technology focused on criticizing the product, like express testing, load testing, performance testing. It's illities, right? So I use that as an exercise in my courses, and what usually happens is, I have to explain the exercise properly. Explain and give just a brief introduction to the problems as I did right now. Then I ask testers to take sticky notes, write down all the techniques that come to mind, then have them fill that onto the quadrants. There's one striking pattern I see all the time. There is the quadrant there, this one, the second one, usually is pretty empty for teams new to Agile. This makes me a bit worried because, well, of course, unit testing is a developer thing, right? And all we do is just criticizing the product. And I think there's a key problem in there with how we're currently working, that we don't know how to support our team with whatever we do. I think we need to solve that. A few weeks ago, I was at the conference of the Association of Software Testing in San Jose, in California, and Elizabeth Henningsen held a keynote there where she said, I think we should relabel the quadrants. The horizontal perspective is not criticizing the product versus supporting the team, but it's more testing versus checking focused. So going more in a different direction than that, but it's still a important thing. But we have on the right side tests that support the external qualities of the product versus the internal quality. That on the top thing we have things like exploratory testing and so on. I still have to, I wrote a blog entry after that about that. I think the dimension is more interesting and could help, for example, testers see where are we and how can we support the team in the end. In order not to end up with an anti-product like this. Right? So it's more testing versus checking. Did anyone read the blog entry from Michael Bolt from 2001? Like Bolt claimed there's a difference between testing where you actually have to bring in your brain, well, at least we don't know how to program that really. And checking, which is most of what automated testers are doing. But also if you go back to more traditional things, test cases, for example, are one term of checking, but with a human sitting behind there. And it's, well, the actual claim is, it's a waste of brain power that you do if you do such test case-based checking, right? Because your brain can do more. Right, so the testing problems, for me at least, just made one problem transfer to some extent. can we help? How can we support our team? First thing, this is something I draw from Scrum. You have in Scrum 3 different roles, right? One question usually that comes up, okay, what about my business analyst, what about my designers, what about my testers, eventually, right? Because Scrum defines or says, all we are trying to look at is the product owner, which is the guy who has the money. Then we have, on the other hand, the Scrum Master, who is sort of a servant leader for the team, who's trying to remind them, this is what you're trying to improve you to do, is that what you're trying to do, is that the right thing to do, and so on. And then we have the team, which is intended to be self-organized, to be cross-functional, so that's why testers are also part of that team. And as part of a team of 5 to 7 people, you have to find out, okay, what's this thing, what is my value I bring to that team? It's easier to hide that value in a team of 20 or so, if you have a large scale project in mind, but in a team of 5, whenever someone is sick, it actually can bring bad news to the product the next day. Right? So you have to find a spot where to work on. This means that over time, maybe you start to learn programming by sitting together with the programmer and pairing with them. That could also mean that the programmer learns how to test by doing that. I think this is a key thing you have to learn in order to do that. So being part of the team means that we have to somehow think, what can we do? There's one thing I learned while I was working in waterfall projects. I was reading about being able to be involved in the product, in the project, right from the start, even before the requirements are talked about. And it seems that there are folks who say, oh, I got an idea here, and this is a short representation, idealized representation of what people found out is working. I attended the tutorial from Elizabeth Henriksen back in 2009. I read Bridging the Communication Gap from Gärtner on it. I helped him review specification by example later. That is, when we start at the top, we have a discussion about what is the thing we're going to build. We work with stories, we work with story counts, and try to figure out once this function is implemented, once this feature is implemented, how does it look like? What are your acceptance criteria to your business stakeholder? That's the discussion we have. Over time, we just have these acceptance criteria identified with each feature. And what we might have to refine them depends on how long you're going to take your business, your customer, your business representative into such a discussion. Usually it's not that much time if you can get that. Over time, you refine them right before the iteration starts. You have a basis for acceptance criteria which are ideally able to be automated. So within the iteration, you take these examples that you identified in the discussion, and alongside the development of production code, you also develop test code that shall automate this thing. If you take a look on what this behavior-driven development thing is currently going on about, they drive it to the top and they say we're going for outside-in development. That means they don't even write a single line of production code without having a motivation from a failing acceptance test. That they drive in from the acceptance test the domain logic, the production code for that. But I still think this is an advanced technique and a good start. It's pretty fine to start with just developing it in parallel first. Then you just later also work, but I doubt it. So once we developed production code and acceptance tests, at some point we luckily find ourselves that acceptance test pass or the unit test pass. So we have to trigger that we are potentially able to ship that product. I say potentially because it could be there's still something working, something that is that the acceptance test still misses because it's not very long, right? might still need to explore that. But once we are finished with that, we can actually go and deliver our acceptance test together with the product, and we have a living documentation there. We have executable specifications just by automating these examples in the right way. Is anyone doing that? Yeah, everybody claims to do it, or it's everybody doing it. Common sense. Common sense. I'm not so sure about common sense. I think common sense is some instance of hindsight, but I'm not so sure about that. Well, it makes sense. Sure, we have a discussion in the end. That's what usually requirements gathering also does. But you do it on a smaller scale, maybe just 4 weeks before the iteration of something. You discuss what is coming up, something like that. You don't do it in a big batch. I saw at a more traditional organized company the advantage of only the discussion part. We just where do I start? We had product development department. The product development department had built a product which is system integration department. They integrated for some customers, so they made the customization for the customers. And they built rather generic products, so we were able to define different set of products inside the product with rules, rule systems, and so on. And it was a huge configuration file for one client in Brazil. We had 18 megabytes XML configuration file just for the product. They were unsure because you could actually on the user interface you could configure that. And they were unsure because there was a feature which toggled that. And I was working in the system integration department, and we were the only guys who were using that particular function. So they approached us and said, okay, we got this function, this is troubling us, we want to change that, and we will have less effort if we can maybe get rid of it or find a better replacement for that. What we did, got together and in a workshop of 4 hours, together with the product manager back then, we identified what is the approach we're going to use there, and also alongside that identified some rough examples which were not automated at all. But after 6 months we got a piece of the product which worked for us, right? Which also helped the product development team move forward faster. Okay. So it's a different scale, but it still worked to a good degree. Just having the discussion usually brings already value. Right. So, exploratory testing. Well, as I said, once these acceptance tests pass, they're just a trigger that you are potentially finished with the product, that you could probably ship it, but it still means that there are lots of things that wouldn't automate. For example, who would automate a test for where you import account details like name, last name, where it is, birthday, and so on, and who would automate a test for the right tab ordering, which tab that you jump to the next input field? Who would do that? There's one guy who would do it, right?
Unfortunately, yes.
Markus, it really heavily depends on the requirement. Sometimes it is required.
Now let me try to explain to you a story which I have in mind. I worked in a swimming department, in a swimming club, local swimming club for quite some years, and in my spare time. And we actually got a new product there at some time because we were switching from, well, we were still using some software in the early 2000s which was built on MS-DOS, and this was becoming more and more drag because printing somehow didn't work anymore. So we decided we want to have a new product, and we tried to evaluate which product could this be, and we tried to play around with that. We had like 200 swimmers inside our system so far. We needed to find a way in order to work better. So we found a product which looked nice, Windows graphical user interface, all the other values that we could also use it quite easily. But there was still one thing that struck me, that was whenever I was entering a new detail about a swimmer, someone else, someone new showed up, maybe 10 people within 2 months or so showed up, I entered their names, right? And if you have like 10 records of account details, this can really become a drag, because you want to do that quickly, you want to do that in a large batch size, right? And well, I was lucky that there was somehow, I was able to migrate all the old 200 account details to the new system, but there was also a problem there. Don't want to talk about that. But I still had to go through that mass several times. What happened was, I realized it was before that last name, first name, birthday, gender, street, zip code, eventually phone number or something like that. That was the ordering, and you don't use the mouse when you enter a lot of details. You hit the tab, go to the next thing. That particular application looked really nice, but it was last name, where is he swimming, first name, I don't know, zip code. It was completely weird. So it was broken, but I still would consider, would I automate this or not? I don't think I would automate such a test. Here's the thing, why not? First of all, you have to keep in mind the return on investment for that test. So, how much value is it delivering? Maybe it's passing all the time, but each time you enter a new field, you need to change that maybe. Or you make it less robust against that. But then you have probably a gap in your automated tests. Right? You have to maintain it, you have to develop it for the first time. So all these factors together would say, no, it's probably more easy if I just say, I take the 20 seconds and do that with an each iteration. Would be valid trade. So that would be where exploratory testing comes in. But also for other things like, does this graphical user interface make sense? Does it look right? Or is there some pixel which doesn't look right? Is there a mouse which the automation still is able to fill it or still able to spot that human brain can't see it? Right? So these are all occasions where we are fooled by our automation. So that's why I say we need to have something like that. Yes. Exploratory testing is something that I found in 2009. Summarized by Agile Testing, is that exploratory testing, startup copy, is that we discover some bug or we discover some behavior. It's not necessarily so that we just discover bugs, we also discover behavior. We have some kind of internal mental model of application that we're working with. And we discover interesting things which we're going to try to expose, right? So at the point where we find a bug or don't find a bug, but something that doesn't match our model internally, we have to make a decision what to do about that, right? So do we go to the right, or do we go to the left? And so that could be, if you find a bug, I make the conscious decision, I'm going for more follow-up tests right now, or I'm just on a tour to get a brief grasp of what the application is doing, and afterwards I'm going to settle for another thing, right? And so this would be some sort of decision I can make here. You can say, okay, I'm just taking note about this bug and coming back to it later, or I'm going to follow up on it right now. That's where the action then happens. So, for whatever decision I make, doing more follow-up tests, trying to figure out how can I expose this problem, how can I make this problem more severe, how can I prevent, how can I gain more information about what this bug really means to the business, versus I'm just trying to figure out, to build a basis mental model for this whole application. I'm going to go back to that later. So it's discover, disguise, and act. In comparison to discuss, develop, deliver. This is the second thing which I think testers bring to not necessarily just agile teams, but also more traditional teams, right? At times we also use automation in order to help us to do better exploration, to be able to set up a test more quickly, when we created an automated test suite once with fitness, and at times we found ourselves just taking one particular of the automated tests, just what happens if I play around with these numbers, what's the outcome? Oh, this looks okay to mine, not, but we were able to do that pretty quickly, just using the automation, because the whole setup routine might have taken us manually 5 minutes or so. Right? There it was just, within 1 minute you had the count of details you wanted to work on. So, I think these are two very crucial parts. I think that also Elizabeth Henriksen summarized it pretty well. What does done mean in Agile? Is a big question. What does it mean if I put this card here to the done column? There's in Scrum the definition of done, teams to struggle with that. Actually, if you try to make it as abstract as it's reasonable to get, done means that the feature is developed using TDD usually, right? We have that. It is checked using ATDD, that would be discussed, developed, delivered. And it's explored. So expose, is there a problem here that our automation didn't find or is not capable of finding? So done means developed using TDD, checked using ATDD and our acceptance test, which we automate, and explored using exploratory tests. That would be minimal basis for me. So this is where we are currently. Yeah. Does anyone recognize this one? This is a major buzz currently. Does anyone recognize that? It's okay if you can't read it.
Yes.
It's intended not for you to read it. Okay. No one recognizes it, you see. There's a book from Eric Rees out there, which has become a major buzz in the Eastern States. I think it's probably coming over to Europe. That is called the Lean Startup. In the Lean Startup, it's a case that you have a startup company and you try to figure out what's my business model. What's the product I can actually sell later? And in order to do that, you have to refine your business model over and over again. So he claims that traditional thinking really doesn't help there. And he has some patterns identified which help him. It starts with, you have an idea, and before you do anything else, you want to find out, is this idea already somehow, somewhere implemented? For example, is there some competition? Right? We had a workshop where we work with Canback, and he challenged us to do that, to come up with an idea for a product. We had the idea that one thing that usually comes up in classes from my colleague who does the Scrum trainings is Scrum product owner trainings. One thing that usually comes up is they use product which they call a cat breeding platform. So you have online a website where you can find other cat breeders and get together really nice cats, so to speak. So we came up with that idea and tried to follow it. So the idea is we want to build a cat breeding platform, right? So then what you do is not necessarily you build something. That could also mean that you do web research. You start Google and see, is there some competitor out there who is competing with my idea? Is there someone else who's doing it in a better way than I can currently imagine? We did that. What came out of that is there are actually cat breeding platforms out there. It was rather interesting because we didn't have emergence. So we could have built the wrong product or just rebuilt another product, but no one will ever get to us. No one will ever sign up for an account within our product because the other product is still far ahead of us, right? So you want to validate that before you spend months of startup with your own money, actually, if you run a startup, to do that. So after the building comes the main part that is take a look, I can't read it. That's a product, right? It's the product. So, from idea you build something in your product, and that could be just knowledge acquisition. From that, in the product usually you build in measures. So you come up with, when you have the idea, you come up with how are we going to measure if we are successful or not. You do that before that. Why do you do that before that? Because you want to be pretty sure that you're on the wrong track. And you could be biased if you build the product and say, this number looks good, just continue, right? So you make up the numbers before that and say, okay, maybe we will get 5% new customers with this. We will build this feature in, and then it will lead to 30% more page visits of our website, something like that. That's what you want to measure here in order to see, is it really happening? And if it's just 10%, you know, we're doing something wrong. You want to have it as a clear decision. That's why you make up the numbers first, and then go to the measurement and say, is it really working? That's when you actually, after the measurement, collect data. You compare the data that you have with the hypothesis you had before that, you can learn from that and say, okay, now I need to build something else, or we're on the right track, just continue. Companies like Facebook is doing this, companies like, we use in Germany Jana, at our company. I think they're doing something like that as well. I don't remember anymore. There are lots of companies doing that right now. They build in incremental features, Twitter does it, right? The backend, they switch some of the features, for example. It could be, we had this recently with Yammer. Some of my colleagues were seeing a different user interface that were doing A/B testing in the backend, trying to figure out if we just rename your personal inbox to another thing, is it attracting more people, or are they not using it at all, or something like that. If you keep an eye for that, you see that people are actually on the web, at least, trying to learn from whatever you're doing. It's the same with mobile phones, for example, as well. They have tracking grids where you are tracked regarding how you behave. Do you come back to the application and so on? Okay, let me tell you a story. I was involved in a project at a larger client in up until March this year. They also had the idea to run a new product in a startup sense. And the idea was to be able, whenever you take a photo, it uploads it to whatever cloud storage you have. Right? So that could be that it just puts your photos, you take them, you come back to Wi-Fi connection, it uploads them to Dropbox, it uploads them to Facebook, to Picasso or whatever. Now we were, I don't know, I think it was February when Dropbox announced we're going to build that. So at that point we were quite sure, okay, we followed this vision, but now this vision is lost because we don't think we can compete with Dropbox. So that was when we had to take a pretty bad goal and try to either identify a new vision, where to pursue. What's the next step? We have built some product, can we reuse it or just abandon it in there? What happened was we abandoned it. But that was a pretty tough decision. What we didn't do there was, or we didn't do it in a good way, that was the measurement, we didn't have any data and we didn't have any hypothesis, what is the potential growth of customers once we go live with this. So that was a drag. For example, we had two teams, one iPhone team and one Android team. The Android team already had something in place there, but they figured out that on Android it's actually the case that no one is coming back to the application. They set up background synchronization, that's it. So no one is revisiting that application. Does it have a valid business model or not? That's not. So main things in lean startup are validated learning and different hypotheses about your product. And I think that looking forward, where are we heading to as testers in general, we can help there with our critical mindset, trying to identify what is this validated learning we're going to do here. is this the right hypothesis we're working on? What's the flaw in this business model we have tested? I somehow just did that in that product. Okay, we continue. So this would be one future prospect. Another thing is that more and more we start to work in cross-functional teams. And as I said earlier, regarding the testing products, we have more and more to find ways in order to be able to contribute to that. Right? Currently, I see more and more companies going from department thinking between we have developers and we have testers, and they are in different departments and they have different incentives, to we have one team that has the same goal and we try to achieve that. Okay. I took the black box software testing courses this year, and there's a compelling story about that. There's where they speak about metrics in the performance measurement systems. And there's actually one case where testers were evaluated by the amount of bugs they find. Right? So if you find more bugs, you get a raise, something like that, or you get a better bonus or whatever. And the product development department said to the developers, if you fix more bugs, then you're going to get a raise. Can you imagine how long this can take? So what happened was actually the programmers and the testers met in the morning and said, okay, which bugs are we going to implement today? And here's the list of things that you can submit to the bug tracking system. So you are in a good shape, the company actually, well, I don't know what happened to them. I imagine they went out of business. But just because of some stupid performance metrics. It seems on an informal level they somehow already formed their team in their company, right? Because they got together and tried to figure out how can we treat the system. But if we can actually build teams that, as a side effect, builds a product which ships, I think we might be better. Right? I think this is the final slide. Yes, it is. Right. If we think this further, how do we as testers contribute to a team? That probably means there's something involved which comes from psychology, or comes from team building, sociology. There are lots of different areas which are interesting if we think this further. And here are just two ideas I ran across. The thing on the top is congruent communication from Virginia Satir. Has anyone heard that or? I think you were the guy with the top automation. Right? Never mind. Great. Congruent communication is that for communication to be congruent, you usually have three things that should be there. That is that you provide something about yourself, about your own side. What am I thinking when I hear that? You try to engage with the other, you try to see his point, and you try to have context. Right? And Virginia Satir, a therapist, claimed that when you leave out something of this mix, then you end up with incongruent communication. There's something that happens magically. For example, if you leave out the self position, you're leaving out yourself, you're just listening to the others. And if the project manager turns in and says, okay, you have to work overtime over the next week, and no, it's the 8th week in a row, and so on. And just say, okay, I'm going to do that, and giving up yourself. So it could be that you are not active congruent there. That means that you're probably placating that project manager. On the other hand, that project manager comes in and gives up the other position, which is, I see you have worked 8 weeks in a row, we need to put in more time here. I can't ask you to spend more time away from the family right now. So what he's doing is he's blaming it. Usually this is a pattern we find pretty often, that there's one party giving giving up himself and another party giving up the other position. And they're forming a feedback loop, a positive feedback loop, which is self-engagement. There are other things, for example, if you leave out the context, you're dubbing on 18 position. If you leave out the self and other, you're super unreasonable. If you leave all of them, you become not irrelevant. You become a clown, actually, right? And I think in order to be able to contribute to a team where communication is happening, you have to be aware that some of the messages we deliver are not that pleasant for a programmer to hear. So we have to find a way to approach them in a positive manner. That means that I see you've put in 20 hours in order to bring up this new feature. I have problems understanding what you did there, can you help me out there, and then try to work from that basis. There's a similar model from a German psychologist who said actually we are hearing messages with 4 different ears, where we put different emphasis on, and we also say messages with 4 different focuses. One thing is, of course, the content. What am I talking about? The other thing is, where do I continue? I continue with self-revelation. Whenever I say something, like, I'm standing here telling you the story about the pinback in the front of an audience, TDD. We're not going to use it anymore in 10 years to come or something like that. That reveals something about money or about pinbacks. Maybe, yeah, right? There's also, that's an interesting thing, bad things can happen if you have an overemphasis on the relation between who you're talking to. So it could be that I don't have a pretty good example, but it could be I go to lunch and there's a buffet, there's a queue lining up behind there, like at any conference that happens. Now it could be that I try to challenge you and just walk randomly around the buffet but not queuing. So that could give you a certain picture of the relation that I see there. That it's more important for me to get something to eat than I think it is for you. Right? It's just something we have to be aware of. Right? And finally, in every message there is some sort of plea, or there could be some sort of plea. That means here's a message, and now what are you going to do with that? Or I want you to do now, I want you to spend more time on automation, I want you, right, that could be the dialogue. But then, if I formulate it, like, I want you to do more automation, it could be that I leave out, what's the content, why do I need to do this? Self-revelation, then the relation says, okay, he seems to find himself in the manager position, he wants to extend that, and the relation is that he directly says in a command control manager, I want to do that, but without understanding maybe the context of it all. That is, I think more automation will just not help because the program is developed badly or something like that. Right? So I think in order to contribute to a team, we have to be aware of such things, team dynamics happening there, and how to communicate well in such a setting. Correct? So these are the 2 things I see for the future. There are more. Now let me conclude with the story from 2 weeks ago, I think. That is cloud. The cloud. Everyone has to be in the cloud right now. If you follow the internet, there was a story where someone got his Twitter account hacked by using his Amazon and iTunes or iCloud data. And as a side effect of that, he got rid of all of his family photos stored in the iCloud were deleted. Because they took over the Amazon account, then they took over the iCloud account, and in order to wipe away all the footprints that could be there, they just completely destroyed their account, deleted all the data there. then in the end they add this is like the Twitter handle, because it was just 4 characters Twitter handle that was all that was behind that. With more and more focus on these cloud names, I think there are interesting things we have to keep in mind what could go wrong with this product. For example, I recently found a product which claimed if you have an address book, I'm going to connect together with your Twitter account, with your LinkedIn account, put in all this information there, and then you have it on your phone as well. So what happened was, it just did that, but the problem was, I was lost because there were accounts troubled twice, 3 times now on my phone, and had to clean them up. Right? So this is also something that could go wrong. Or automated picture uploads is also nice. I've set up iCloud accounts, it puts all my photos from my iPhone to the cloud. It's the same with the iPad, but in the end, I feel lost currently with all the pictures there. I don't know where is this from. I see pictures doubled, tripled from different events. I can't use the pictures anymore, just because it's so stupid cloud idea, it seems. But I think, as a community of software developers, with developing, programming, and testing together, we have to find cleverer ways to prevent users from such good bad bugs. All right. Any questions?
Hi, my name is Roman. The question is, we talked what about all stuff about Agile, but the question, for example, have a big project, yeah, and we have some stuff that developed by waterfall, and process won't be changed for all stuff, but some new stuff trying to create with Agile. Do you have some suggestions how to make this process easier and not conflicting with when we need to stay with all stuff developed continue the support by waterfall process, but incorporate Agile within new stuff for new features or for some new functionalities, and you use it easily and without conflict.
Okay, let me make sure that I understood the question right. Is the question that you're working in a company when you have waterfall and Agile teams working somehow being...
Even when same team working, but a lot of functionalities, and some of them still will be supported because they are legacy, they won't be changed, and they just should work as is. But for new features, proposed to use Agile stuff, and for example, we see that some conflicts happen because except on regression stuff, because we need to regress.
I would try to go to one way of working. And I have a preference for Agile there, but it could be that waterfall is working for you, and if it's working for you, don't change it. Just try to figure out what works for you. It's the question to answer that.
The reason why we're trying to use Agile because new features very customer driven and need very fast responses, fast updates that are not possible with waterfall. So the question is it possible, as you think, maybe you have some notes how to eliminate conflict between the stuff.
Let me cite my colleague, the CST student, the Scrum trainer from us. He said that he's never seen a team working in a successful way together for waterfall teams. Usually it means you have to find ways to do some trade-offs there. In the long run, you're better set up if you can work in a complete Agile way. That could mean that you have more traditional features or bugs requests coming in, but you prioritize them and plan them just as you do any other new feature to implement using Scrum, using XP, whatever you want.
Product testing developed, covered with the tests like acceptance unit test and then explore. Why did you explore it in the very last place? Because like our big designer is always saying that while testing we should always use informal combine, like informal. So.
I don't know why I put that last. It could have something to do with you have to need at least some tiny product which you can explore if you want to have the features somehow built before you can start exploring, but you can also bring that earlier into it. I see that as well.
So it can go before that.
Yeah, sometimes I also use automation in order to explore the product to some extent. So I try to explore with automation while I'm building this automation I find bugs. That happens a lot of times. You can't just strictly separate the two.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Mark, do you believe that because there are some people who still are already think that the child is dead? What do you think about it?
It's a tough question. My thoughts currently are, I think Agile has become some sort of a buzzword. There's the spirit missing from the early days. There's, for example, one thing why Bradbury 2 or 3 years ago came up with, we need to change that. If you take a look on the software partnership movement, which I'm also involved in, this is just trying to get back to the roots there. Bradbury came up with, I think we need to do accelerator futurism, which also teach the analysis. Because what's in there is this thing, this idea from the early days that you go to, you have cubicle walls all over the place, and people actually came in over the weekend in order to tear down those walls, make it an open working environment, and then have one team room where people are not separated from each other, but actually could work together in very separation or something like that. This is one of the aspects, it's good business. It's more like people drag themselves to work and okay, now we're going to do the daily stand-up and just what's the first way to what have I done. So the spirit is missing from that. It's not that. What Agile is changing, of course, because more and more enterprises go to it. Naturally, that has to do with more and more bugs being around that as well. And the next folks are already trying to figure out what's the next thing now, since at least 3 years.
Okay, thank you very much.